Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to be doing some street photography, but this time I'm going to be putting people in my photographs. It's not something I often like doing, to be honest with you. I don't quite enjoy running up to people and just snapping them as they're walking past. I generally like to take photographs that I think I can make a print of and put behind a frame, and the last thing I want on the wall in my home is someone I don't know. And usually when I do street photography, it's often back streets and buildings and quirky angles and stuff like that. And I find myself quite a diverse photographer. You guys know me, I'm off out shooting landscapes, seascapes, me dog George, cat. I don't really like doing cats, they just scratch, but people, cars, and also street photography as well. And yesterday I went out with the Chinon CE5 camera, a cable release, and a roll of Ilford Ortho 80, which I only shot half of, and it was raining, and I thought this is going to be great. I'll go out in the rain and try and get some street photography in the rain, including people, but I didn't want those people to be recognisable, so my plan was to shoot a slower shutter speed, plot up, get my shot composed, wait for people to walk past. But the first thing I had to do was get my camera covered. I didn't want this to get wet. I don't think these things are weatherproof, so I put this nice, you can see this hood on this 50mm lens here, this little hood. I put that on top of the lens so then my lens isn't going to get any water droplets on. And then I've got a carrier bag, a clear carrier bag, placed it over the top, taped it all round, lovely jubbly, a little tiny hole in the top for my cable release, off I went. But when I got on location, which is about 20 minutes away from where I live, it wasn't even raining, the ground was bone dry, and I thought, okay, well, I can rip the bag off and still carry on. I was a little bit disappointed because I wanted to get those rainy shots in, you know, the wet ground and reflections and stuff. So it kind of went out the window, my idea, but I carried on anyway with the plan, which was to shoot streets, compose, get people, motion blur with a slow shutter speed. So I came back, developed the photographs in Rodinal, and I'll show you these photographs and what I think of them. So I've just got out on location to where I live, probably about, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles away, about a 20-minute drive, and it ain't raining this side of the island, so I'm going to take this bag off. In one way I was hoping it would rain, but never mind. Good idea though, I'll keep it in my pocket. I must admit I felt a bit lazy on this shot. I felt like I should have got a little bit lower down and had the front of the car right in your face, but that's the composition I set up, and then it was time to wait for another car to come past, which is what you can see in the background. But it's a great car though, Triumph Herald. I then went across the road to photograph the side of the car, and I composed it so you can see the front wheel arch and also the surgery in the background. I took one shot with no one in the frame, and I thought it looked very 60s, obviously without the telltale signs of modern day. I then waited for a person to walk past. At this time I didn't know what effect the slow shutter would have on a person walking by. I had to hit the shutter at the right time so the person would feel the right side of the frame just before the car. I then took another shot of the back of the car just for jolly. Coming up here you can see this is the hovercraft that carries people to and from the island, and between me and the hovercraft is a train track, and I waited on the stair overpass for a passenger to walk past. First was the composition, and then I waited for a person. I first set up the composition that I wanted, and then all I needed to do was wait for a person to walk past. I took a second photograph with 2 people walking by, and again I thought my 1/4 second speed would not create so much motion, but I guess that's all depending on how fast or slow people walk. They're going a bit too slow. I then went onto the pier and composed my shot, and then I waited a long while for this couple to get closer. And looking at the photograph now, I wasn't too keen on this sort of motion. They just look too clean. I think I would have preferred them to be more blurry, so if they walked a little bit faster, maybe that might have made a more interesting photograph. Even so, I think even just one person, not two. And in this photograph you can see I've changed the angle of the pier, and you can see the pier railing starting my composition. Again, I waited for these three people to walk past and then I hit the shutter. It doesn't look that bad, but personally I think I would have preferred it better if there was only just one person, that person in the middle. The other two on the outside I feel kind of spoiled the photograph. And then I took one more when they were nearer at the end of the pier, and I waited for the right moment when they were just almost silhouetted against the sky. In this photograph I came to the side of the pier. Unfortunately the tide was out and I had no choice but to have that brick groin in the shot. Yet knowing it was there, I had to still make it work, so I composed it coming from the bottom right corner of the frame, making sure that the pier was dead straight. I waited ages for someone to walk by, and then this person came along and I took the shot, hit the shutter. I just like the way the person is kind of bent over in this shot. I think it kind of adds to it a little bit more. And the same composition again, but this time I hit the shutter when a cyclist went by. I felt it was just a shame that the tide was low. I don't often like seeing seaweed on the sand, I just think it looks messy. And if that tide was in, the whole bottom part of the composition would have been sea. I think that would have looked a lot better. So I'm now in the high street, and this is a fat guy poster. I composed the angle trying to get as much of the building in as possible, and also had the road in the shot too. I would have liked to have had the window at the top as a whole, but my back was against a wall and I didn't have no more room for composing the shot. But again, I waited for someone to walk past. And it doesn't matter what the person looked like, I knew that it would have some kind of motion blur going on. And I did another photograph with a different person on the same scene. So in my boredom, I just walked around and I ended up back on the pier, and this time I thought I'd try out taking some photographs of pigeons. I think pigeons are a great subject on the street, as you know, it's their home, and unless it's a wood pigeon, which is basically a pigeon that's lost. But in these photographs I carefully composed the scene, and then with the release cable in my mouth I clapped really hard to scare the birds, then quickly hit the shutter, but unfortunately a quarter of a second was a bit too slow as the birds were quite fast. I like the whole composition and the idea, but I felt maybe 1/25th of a second might have worked. You know, a faster shutter speed might have worked rather than a quarter of a second. As you can see here, they're totally blurred out. And I don't know what happened here on this photograph, we'll skip this one. And I'm back on the high street again now, which goes up a hill, and I composed the camera low down for these shots and waited for someone to walk past. The first people that walked past was walking past me with their backs to me, and these were slow walkers, they're going up a hill, and I just think the photograph looks boring, the whole scene's boring. Even the people, what they're wearing is boring, you know, it's just average, so nothing really floating my boat on this photograph. And the same composition again, and this time you can see a guy's walking down the hill, but another boring photograph. He must have been walking very slow because that quarter of a second shutter speed hardly gave him any blur at all. But maybe if the guy looked more interesting, you know, it might have worked, but I just think the whole composition, it just looks total pants really. And from that position I just flipped the camera around, composed the angle straight across the road and waited for people to walk past. I took a couple of shots here, various people walking past, and again just a little bit boring, nothing to interest really in these photographs, that's what I find. And then I took a few more images. One of them was a total screw up, another was a crossing with a car passing, then I went back to the pier with no one on it, and I found a barrel outside a pub. So overall it wasn't a bad shoot. It's something that I haven't really dabbled with before, which is shooting street and people on a slow shutter. I think I realised that maybe a quarter of a second was a bit too slow, but then it's horses for courses. Some people are walking slow, some people are walking fast. To be honest with you, none of those photographs I'd want to print, you know, but it's just a case of going out and doing it again and doing it again and doing it again. And like they say, you might come back next time with a couple of decent photographs that you like. I also think it's quite hard to do street photography around your own area. I mean, obviously through the pandemic and stuff, we can't travel as much as we'd like to. So I'm often walking around the high streets near where I live, And it's quite boring because it's all the same. You've seen it again and again and again. And also, you know, you're limited with the people. If you go to a city, there's so much variety, you know, so many multicultures going on around you and stuff, and different walks of life. And I find that a little bit more interesting. So hopefully when all this pandemic clears over a little bit more, we're a bit more free to travel. I can get back up to London, which is where I'm from, and start shooting some streets up there. So anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. As always, thanks very much for watching my videos. Thanks to all those people that subscribe to the channel and the people that support me on Patreon and the YouTube members area as well. I'm going to go off and watch some football and enjoy the rest of my Sunday afternoon. Have a great weekend. I'll catch you next time.